I was lucky enough to receive early access to Long Fallen Dynasty, and to say the very least, it is a phenomenal Souls-like that can only be adequately described as Sekiro and Ninja Gaiden's love child. And I love almost everything about this game. From its beautiful art style to its damn near perfect gameplay, there are nearly no end of positives to say, but there's just one major issue that means I can't recommend it to anyone on PC, which is that the PC port is one of the worst ever created, and I do not say that lightly. Continuing the trend of AAA studios releasing busted and genuinely damn near unplayable games here, Wolong launches in a state that can only be described by me saying that this should be illegal, and to say the very least, I am thoroughly tickled. In fact,
I just can't do it. I can't take this shit no more, man.
And the PC version, being as horrifically bad as it is, really does suck massively, because this is one of the best Souls-likes of all time, featuring one of the best character creation menus available, with the core gameplay revolving heavily around a blend of Sekiro takedowns, along with an incredibly heavy emphasis on parrying and Ninja Gaiden movement, all coming together to form one of the most ridiculously addicting gameplay loops you'll ever encounter. However, the main complaint I have is the lack of iframes you're given for dodging, because in my opinion this is the only problem with combat. You'll frequently die even if enemies have not visibly hit you, because the roll mechanic does not give you any sort of iframing, unlike its FromSoft counterparts. As a whole, it may not be a large issue for you since dodging is made almost entirely useless by the beautiful parrying mechanic you're brutally forced to adopt at the start of the game via one of the hardest first bosses in a game I've seen. Although it is admittedly an effective way to make sure players adopt the specific playstyle you're required to utilize throughout the game, it will likely result in a lot of players being discouraged from continuing, with Wolong essentially slamming the brakes on them via the huge difficulty spike this entails over the small amount of enemies you fight in the tutorial section beforehand. The rest of the boss fights in this game continue to never fail at excellency unless you somehow manage to be as stubborn as Asmongold, and simply refuse to parry effectively as you were brutally taught to do.
I think the boss fights are just garbage. That's what it comes down. I think the boss fights are legitimate garbage. The difficulty is just purely built around the attacks having different delays and you having to continuously attack the boss and fight the boss to figure out what those attack patterns are. I think that a lot of them have almost no indicator before they happen. I just think that they're bad. I think they're bad mechanics.
If you're as inspiringly stubborn as Asmongold was whilst playing Wolong, you will have a miserable time with all of the bosses, as dodging is predominantly taken out of the equation for a more methodical, Sekiro-esque parrying style of gameplay, paired alongside what are called Divine Beasts, which are essentially ultimate moves that help you end the boss fight early. And as you progress through the game, you'll notice each boss tends to use at least similar attack patterns and abilities as previous bosses, along with their own unique and defining ones in order to make the game's reliance on parrying more fair. This is that rare case where reusing gameplay mechanics and boss attacks across a multitude of them is actually a good thing, rather than a negative. The only complaint I could possibly come up with in regards to a few fights is that the companions you're forced to have often end up taking the boss's focus, making it a little too easy for my taste, which definitely feels like a duct tape fix from the developers for the arena style boss fights, sometimes being slightly too small. Progressing through your abilities level, fortification, gear level, and so on is certainly overwhelming. The basic gameplay of Long Fallen Dynasty is simplistic and sublime, but thanks to all these additional, however not necessarily necessary mechanics, the gameplay is vehemently difficult to master. For example, fortification can be increased by killing enemies placing battle flags, which are the equivalent of Dark Souls campfires in this game, placing the tiny little flags in areas dotted around every level, but can also be lost by dying to any enemy that is not a boss. The only time a boss will decrease your fortify is if it were gained during your fight against it. The loot driven aspects of Neo are heavily present here as well, and for my personal taste, this is where Wolong shines in comparison to Sekiro. Whether you prefer one of these games over the other is honestly going to be entirely down to whether or not you like the heavy Neo RPG RNG elements seen here that aren't in Sekiro. And compared to Neo, the magical abilities offered in Wolong are substantially better, even more so when you look at the diversity of spells offered. These will be used as a secondary weapon to your melee and are required to deal with larger groups of enemies in the semi-open world. The character building offered here is on par with Elden Ring. Everything you choose to do with your points from leveling up matters, and helps to form whatever build you are desiring. The number of possibilities offered here is brilliant and certainly why I personally prefer this over Sekiro myself. Also, there's these cool and sometimes weirdly cute little demons of which are completely friendly to the player. They're cool, I guess. I haven't really felt the need to interact with them all that much, but the panda demon is exceptionally cute. Now, although everything in this game is damn near perfection, the storytelling is not the best. It's certainly good enough, but I honestly have no idea what's going on. It definitely feels like you're just dropped into this world and shoved into the story halfway through. In my opinion, this isn't a big deal at all since the gameplay is so goddamn fucking addicting, and so I won't go into much detail about it. Unfortunately, however, I have finally ran out of things to talk about when it comes to the game itself, and so, to put it into perspective just how bad this PC port actually is, the Callisto Protocol at launch had fewer issues than this. One of the first settings you are instantly greeted with upon opening the game highlights perfectly just how egregiously bad of a port this is. Now, you may be a little confused as to why this is a thing in the PC version of a game. After all, these are blatantly console settings. Well, it shouldn't be there. The developers have clearly forgotten to remove it on the Steam and Game Pass builds because it does absolutely fuck all. And unsurprisingly, you have to use the typical PC settings in order to adjust graphical fidelity as well as resolution. Even with these options, you are incredibly limited to a ridiculous degree. My current leading theory as to why this is seen on the PC version, despite it clearly having not meant to be, is that they copy and pasted the PS5 version over to PC and did essentially nothing else to it. I understand that's not very convincing, but I'll tell you how I'm aware of this. It's quite simple. Not only does it show you the console performance UI at the start of the game, but it also defaults to using PlayStation buttons for everything until you change that in the settings, along with the actual user interface itself screaming out that they haphazardly put it together to check a few boxes that have to be checked for PC players to typically not complain. Only they did such a laughably bad job that everyone's noticed and everyone is complaining. I've truly never seen such a bad UI in my entire life. It has got to be the most non-user friendly user interface ever created. By dividing the settings up into these pages that are clearly only there because it's the console version haphazardly made into the PC version, they've made it damn near impossible to properly navigate. Instead of like in every other game ever created where you can just scroll through a list, allowing you to actually see what settings are there and to find what you want, they've done this. There is a reason why everyone has the same standardized UI for these things, and the main reason as to why I believe this is nothing more than a terrible copy and paste of the PS5's version is the fact that keyboard and mouses are practically unusable at the moment, thanks to controller dead zones applying to mouse input. That means if you even want to move your mouse cursor on the menus, you have to be moving your arm at warp speed. Failing to support mouse and keyboard in any way, shape or form on PC is unacceptable. That's simply a fact, especially when this is the type of game of which there's no reason to not support mouse and keyboard. When it comes to the basic optimization of the PC version, it's awful. I could look past everything else as just an inconvenience, but the optimization half of the time will make this game unplayable, especially in the third zone. CPU usage for one is off of the charts crazy, using sometimes 70% of my CPU when I have a Ryzen 9 5900X.
How does that work?
There is no way in hell this game should use 40% of my CPU, let alone 70%. Bear in mind I have an RTX 3070 Ryzen 9 5900X and 32GB of RAM whilst running this on an SSD, specifically the Samsung 980 Pro. I'll bet for a fact that most of these performance issues I'm experiencing could be fixed with a simple compiler at the start of the game when you open it for shader compilation, something the Callisto Protocol, again, game very similar to this in terms of poor optimization, introduced in order to at the very least reduce the performance issues people were having, and it worked. Without it, it can result in performance like you're seeing on screen. Although I'm honestly not entirely sure these are compilation stutters, it could very well just be horrific optimization, since the overall performance of this game is about as bipolar as a 14-year-old white girl on crack. At times you'll be between 80 to 100 FPS, and other times you'll be between 30 and 45 FPS, with no real reason for that to be the case. If you are on PC, don't even bother picking this game up for the time being. There is a reason why this is rated as mostly negative on Steam. For the vast majority of people out there, it will be pretty much unplayable. The publisher for this game is well renowned for releasing some of the worst ports in the industry, and considering the fact this game appears to have outperformed all of the past Neo games on Steam, I doubt that will change anytime soon. Evident even more by the success of Wolong in comparisons to Wild Heart, another game they've recently published which is sold well, despite it also having terrible optimization. If you are on PS5/Xbox, please don't be afraid to pick this game up, because it is genuinely the perfect combination of Neo, Sekiro and Ninja Gaiden that any RPG and Souls-like fan would enjoy. So with all that being said, please do not forget to do all the things YouTubers love to beg you to do, aka check out the Discord server, Twitter, as well as like, comment and subscribe, as we have finally come to the end of my review for Wolong, and I will hopefully see you all in the next video.